able physically to stand. I want on this day for us to celebrate God's gift of black women, and we thank God for you and what you've meant to our existence in these yet to be United States of America. And I'll note you in just a few moments. I want to read from two places today, in Luke chapter 11, and then we're going to backtrack to 1 Kings chapter 10. All right, pray for me, pray for me. Luke 11, verse 31, and Jesus says this, he says, "The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with the men of this generation and condemn them. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, something greater than Solomon is here." Now go back with me to the Old Testament, 1 Kings chapter 10. I'm going to read verses 1 and some of the ensuing and following verses. "Now the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord. She came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all of her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his cupbearers, his burnt offerings, and that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more breath in her. And she said to the king, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpasses the report that I heard. Happy are your men, happy are your servants who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king that you may execute justice and righteousness. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold and a very great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again came such an abundance of spices as these that the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Skip down to verse 13. And King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all that she desired, whatever she asked, besides what was given her by the bounty of King Solomon. So she turned and went back to her own land with her servants. I want to put a tag on this text for the next few moments that I was to share. I just want to talk about when Jesus celebrates black girl magic. You can have your seats. When Jesus celebrates black girl magic. For those who might not know, black girl magic is an expression coined by Kashawn Thompson to speak of the beauty, the power, and the resilience of African American women. Black girl magic is an expression that was more clearly defined by Julie Wilson, senior fashion editor of Huffington Post, who said black girl magic is a term used to illustrate the universal awesomeness of black women. It's about celebrating anything we deem particularly dope, inspiring, or mind-blowing about ourselves. Just so that there is no inclarity, Black Girl Magic is when Serena Williams returns from birthing a child having complications during her postpartum period, 3 months after which she goes to the finals of both Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. Black Girl Magic is when Ava DuVernay and our sister Shonda Rhimes write so prolifically that they're able to captivate the national attention on the small and the silver screen. Black Girl Magic is when Kamala Harris and Auntie Maxine Waters go to congressional hearings and make the good old boys shake in their boots. As a matter of fact, Black Girl Magic is not a new phenomenon. Since this little planet we call Earth has been in existence, Black Girl Magic has been happening on this little planet we call Earth. Let me just prove it to you on this morning. When I call your group, I want you to stand on your feet. If you are a sister and you are serving in ministry, you are a minister, an elder, a diaconate, a trustee, member of our council, you ought to stand on your feet if that's you, and keep on standing on your feet. If you are a sister who is a physician, a nurse practitioner, a dentist, I want you to stand on your feet. A mental health care worker, a social worker, a psychologist, stand on your feet. If you are a lawyer, if you serve as possibly administrative and executive assistant, I want you to stand on your feet. If you are in drama and in the arts, I want you to stand on your feet on this morning. If you possibly might be a domestic engineer, you know, the CEO of your household, you ought to stand on your feet. If you're a civil, a chemical engineer, a pharmacist, I want you to, if you're an architect, if you just a sister and you just know you got it going on, just stand on your feet. This is Black Girl Magic in the house on this morning. Holla if you hear me, sisters. And so since we're clear as to what Black Girl Magic is in the pages of Scripture, in the midst of Jesus' ministry, there is a sister that was so awesome in her day and time that centuries after she had passed off of the scene, Jesus mentions her because people were so well acquainted with her reputation. Jesus mentions her because in his generation, there were people who lived with, in his day and time, who knew of who he was, who he would be to this world, and they did not believe who Jesus Christ was. And so he lifts up who he calls the Queen of the South, who's also the Queen of Sheba, to note in their midst that she has taken such a distance in her day and time to visit King Solomon, but yet there are those who have the Word made flesh in their midst, and yet they won't believe in who Jesus Christ really is. And when we look at her story, I think it begs for us to consider her story and her witness and her testimony, because this sister has it going on. And if you give me just a few moments, I believe in her life's story, in her meeting with King Solomon, it teaches us that God uses the queries of this queen and the splendor of Solomon to teach us life lessons and ultimately point us to the Lord Jesus Christ. This is not just recorded in the pages of Scripture to fill up the pages, but this encounter is recorded in the pages of Scripture not just for us to celebrate the wealth and the splendor of King Solomon, but it's also for us to note a sister who has it going on in her own right. And in this morning, I want to ask of this text, what does the Queen of Sheba demonstrate to us so that we can learn from her visit with King Solomon? First of all, this is a sister who demonstrates leadership ability. hang with me for a moment, we discover that when she makes up her mind, the journey from Sheba, which, brothers and sisters, in current days and time is in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen, but also in that day and time, it was a kingdom that spanned beyond the Arabian Peninsula to the East African country by the name of Ethiopia. And she takes a 1,200 to 1,500 mile trek from where she ruled and reigned all the way to Jerusalem to meet King Solomon. Now, I know this might not mean much to those of us who are here today, but this was in a day and a time where there was not any kind of aircraft carrier. There was not a private jet that she can get on. You know, there was not Air Force Sheba that she could have got on and flown to see King Solomon. As a matter of fact, that 1,200 to 1,500 mile trek would take literally months for her to make a round trip. So think about this. The head of the queendom, the queen of Sheba, has to leave her nation, be absent, and go to Jerusalem 1,200 to 1,500 miles away and spend months away from her court and her queendom. I want you to hear me here on today. That suggests that this sister had leadership ability, that she could take a leave from her kingdom and things will not spiral out of control in her absence. Y'all are not hearing what I'm saying here today. She had things so much in hand that she felt comfortable enough to leave her palace, leave her court for months on end and not be afraid that when she came back that somebody had taken control of the throne. And my brothers and sisters, she certainly has great leadership ability. People knew she was in charge and she didn't have to be in the room so that she could manifest or flex her muscle. But brothers and sisters, note this with me. She not only demonstrates it by her ability to maintain leadership in her absence, but she demonstrates it as well because although the text says she goes to see King Solomon so that she can verify of his fame, of his wealth, and his wisdom, but it is suggested based upon what we find in verse 26 of the preceding chapter in 1 Kings in chapter 9 that Solomon had just built a fleet of ships so that he could ship goods through waterways. Now, this is of particular interest because Sheba was known to be a shipping power. It had a great shipping industry. As a matter of fact, the fact that Solomon built these ships would pose an issue to their economic stability. And so the queen said, instead of sitting back and being passive concerning what has happened and the innovation of another kingdom, instead of her waging war against Solomon and destroying the fleet of ships, in order for her kingdom to maintain its position as a shipping power, she decides to go to meet King Solomon so that she could put into place a trade agreement so that not only will the interest of her kingdom be protected, but the interest of Israel will be protected as well. My brothers and sisters, maybe we need a queen of Sheba in these days and times, that when there are international and geo-economic conflict, somebody who is politically and economic savvy enough to use diplomacy in order to achieve economic agreements that not only benefit their kingdom but benefit other kingdoms in our world community. Maybe we need this kind of leadership who knows how to sit down at the table and reason and doesn't need to start a trade war, doesn't need to institute tariffs, doesn't have a Twitter tirade, just a sister who is brilliant enough to work things out, who doesn't need a Sheba first agenda, but can work things out for the common good for all of the world. This sister has leadership ability, and thank God for sisters who know how to lead, know how to lead in the church, know how to lead in government, know how to lead in business and industry. Do I have any sisters here today who know how to lead in ways that not just benefit themselves, but benefit as well the entire world community? She not only has leadership ability, don't miss what this trip is primarily about. She demonstrates she has intellectual curiosity. This chapter begins with her saying, I'm going on this trip, and she's heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord. She came to test him with hard questions. And the text records, when you read it, that when she gets to Jerusalem, she came to Solomon. She told him all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. Whereas most read it as a celebration of Solomon's intellect, his wisdom, his knowledge, I believe this is a celebration as well of this sister who not only has a mind, but has something on her mind. We'll hear about her bounty. It is assumed that she has beauty, but she's also a woman who knows how to use her brain. She demonstrates intellectual curiosity. And for those who might not know what intellectual curiosity is, Michael Alston, professor at Eastern Kentucky University, wrote in an article in Psychology Today that the intellectually curious person has a deep, persistent desire to know. She asks and seeks answers to the why questions. And she doesn't stop asking at a surface level, but instead asks probing questions in order to peel back layers of explanation to get at the foundational ideas concerning a particular issue. Literally, what it is suggesting, that intellectual curiosity is the ability that through inquiry to continue to ask questions, not because they want to irritate the person that they're asking questions of, but because they want a deeper understanding of the subject matter that is being discussed. That just blessed my heart right there, because now I understand sisters who are asking questions not because they want to fluster you or frustrate you, but because they just want a deeper Some brother ought to shout today, because you now got an understanding of why you get interrogated. Here's the reality. This was a thinking sister. This was a sister who had intellect. She could dive into deep and significant conversations. Here she is holding her own in conversation with one of the wisest men to have ever walked the earth. And what she teaches us is that in this day and time, many of our minds have been dumbed down. I need to shout out UNCF. Yes, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. If you would just take a moment and reflect upon the physiology and the way in which your brain works and how God has wonderfully gifted every one of us a brain, but yet we're not using it to its maximum potential. We spend hours on end in front of our smart devices and on social media. And we can multitask. We'll be on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and probably a whole lot of other things these kids may know, I don't know. While at the same time, we are watching these silly shows called reality television as if our lives aren't interesting enough. I mean, you think about it, our children, more likely than not, will not know what it is to take out a sheet of paper and a pencil and write out a math problem, which they solve. My brothers and sisters, this ought to cause us to be concerned. It ought to cause us to come to some sense of pause, because we are not truly using our minds to their fullest potential. It is estimated that in the 73-year life expectancy that a human being has the capacity to read over 26,000 books. However, the average human being will only read 200 books in their lifetime. I need to tell you, brothers and sisters, the nature and the ways that we can indicate where someone's mind is to note the nature of their conversation. I believe it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, small minds talk about people. Average minds talk about events. Great minds discuss ideas. Nudge your neighbor and ask them, what's your conversation? Truth of the matter is, your mind is wonderful and awesome, but if you put garbage in. And so the third thing that we note about this sister who's rocking her black girl magic is her financial security. Verse 4, she sees Solomon's wisdom. She sees the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his official, and the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his cupbearers, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord. And she notes all of these things that she has seen. And verse 6 said that she said to the king, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom, but I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and your prosperity surpassed the report that I heard. Hear me today. She received the royal treatment from Solomon. He showed her how well he lived and how palatial his residence was kept. He allowed her to dine sumptuously. She then as well had an opportunity to observe how well his court and his officials and his servants deported themselves and how well they were dressed. She noted all of these things, and she says to Solomon, I heard about how wise you were and how good you were living and how much you have. But what I heard didn't do me any justice. When I got here and saw it for myself, I had to say to myself, the half has not been told of how good your life is. You living a good life, Solomon, but y'all, what makes a compliment is who's saying it. We learn from this passage that she is a woman of means herself. That gives us the weight of this compliment. The text says that without a transaction being carried out, without any goods being purchased, she gave Solomon 120 talents of gold. In weight, that is 4.5 tons of gold. In 2019, hear me, that would represent $100 million in gold that she just gave to Solomon. Now, if she would just give $100 million away, how much more does she have at her disposal? Sister got it going on. She's financially secure in that she can celebrate what somebody else has and yet be content that although she might not have what somebody else has, she's happy with what she has. Because she knows that she is not dependent on that stuff. And she can be happy in what God has blessed her with. Hear me on today. That's what financial security really is. It's being able to celebrate the way God is blessing somebody else. And not get you discombobulated to the point that you become envious or covetous. Envy is your disposition towards the person. Covetousness is your disposition towards their possessions. Envy is to not like a person because of what they have. But covetousness is to want, a matter of fact, want what another has for yourself. And financial security is not about the amount of money you have, but being content in what you have, independent from anybody else. That's why Paul said, I've been full and I've been empty. I've had much and I've had little, but I've come to a point in my life that in whatever state I am, I'm going to be content with what the Lord has blessed you. Do I have a witness here today of some man or some woman who can celebrate the fact if God don't do anything else for you, if he never gives you another designer bag, never gives you another suit, never gives you a brand new car, never gives you a bigger house, that you're content with what the Lord has? Do I have a witness in this place? Financial security. Here's the last thing, and I'm done. She has spiritual sensitivity. She notes Solomon's wisdom and his wealth. But I don't want you to miss something that at the very end of verse 5, she observed his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, that there was no more breath in her. She noted the burnt offerings he offered at the house of the Lord. The burnt offering at the house of the Lord means, although she was watching his wisdom and his wealth, she was also watching his worship. Yeah, wisdom, wealth, but also, let the church say, worship. She really is going to help some brother in the building today, some single brother in the building today, because it says that when she saw his wisdom and saw his wealth and then saw his worship, the text says there was no more breath in her, literally saying it took her breath away. And maybe I can talk to a single brother in the building today that it ain't only about your wisdom. It's not just about your wealth, but there's some sisters who are interested in you and want to see you learn how to worship. Tell somebody that's for free. That's for free. She saw his worship. And she gets to the point where she begins to give Solomon complimentary conversation. She goes in verse 8 that says, happy are your men, happy are your servants who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. He has made you king that you may execute justice and righteousness. She's got such sensitivity to the Spirit. I want you to note, this is not suggesting that she confessed faith in Solomon's God. This does not chronicle a conversion to Judaism. No. But is a woman who has sense enough to know that if he is this wise and if he's living this good and his worship is that great, it surely cannot be something he's achieved by himself. She knows only God can do these kinds of things. I believe if we handed her Psalms, that she would turn to the Psalm that says, this is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This sister, we need to celebrate today because she can know that behind all the material things that we have, all the positions that we may hold, it is only God who's able to elevate, only God who is able to bless, only God who is able to give promotions. I wish I had a witness here today who can look at your life and maybe the life of somebody who you may think is doing a little better than you, and only God is the source of all that they have. And so Jesus lifts her up in Luke 11 and verse 31 because a generation was going to miss Jesus. So he says, this queen of the south will put you to shame because she went the distance to meet King Solomon. But yet the one that we have right before your eyes, we're missing out on what he has to offer. And I want to close by talking to somebody here today. My word for those of you who are here without a relationship with Jesus Christ, those of you who have not made a commitment to the local church, don't let the Queen of Sheba condemn you. There is someone who is greater than Solomon who we need to celebrate. She went the distance to get the Solomon, but we serve a God who went the distance to save us. Do I have a witness here today? Solomon was wise, but our King is the way, the truth, and the life. Solomon was rich with money, but our King is rich in mercy. Solomon's reign came to an end, but our King reigns forever and evermore. When Solomon died, they buried him, but our King, they buried him, and on the third day he rose from the dead. The Queen of Sheba had to travel to get to King Solomon, but our King gave up his throne in glory to come and dwell among us in human flesh. Is there anybody here who can thank God that we have a King in Jesus Christ who went the distance just to save you and me? And so today, if this sister was willing to go the distance to get to King Solomon, and our God, in the person of Jesus Christ, was willing to go the distance to save us, why won't you put your trust in him? He thought you were worth saving. So we came to save your life. He thought you were worth keeping. So he cleaned you up inside. He thought you were to die for. So he came, saved my life, so I can be free, so I can be whole, so I can tell everyone I know. If you want to let everybody know how good our King has been to us, come on, let's give him the praise.